Okay, so Operis analysis kit. So why Operis? Because Operis is the company name. So we based here in London. I'm in Cannon Street. We have an office in Toronto. And just to move to the next slide, what you're going to see is what we do. Okay, so we are not a software house. It's not the core business. We only have this product, and it's a niche product. And the reason we have it, it's because it was necessary to build something for the core business. And as you can see, the core business is model development and model audit and advisory in project finance. Right? So that's where we believe that we are actually very good, auditing and in advisory in project finance. So the software, which has been now almost 20 years that we have these, started with some VBA macros, then evolved to a commercial product, and we've been selling Oak since then. But that's the background of why is it Oak and what we do at Operis. And we also have the training. So I travel along training people in financial services about best modeling practices, financial modeling. So building discounted cash flow models, that sculpting and all that stuff. Right, now, all the names, you always get these slides when you're watching someone talking about a product, but this is training. So let's move to the real stuff. So I'm going to move here to, within this confusion, to a model. So let's say that you just received a model from a client or from a colleague. You don't know anything about that financial model. So this is on public domain, by the way. Okay, so we just pick one from the Office of Deputy Prime Minister. This is a PPP model, and I'm going to just put it here somewhere. Okay. So this is on the public domain, so there's no problems with confidentiality. So you received the model, you never saw it before. How can we use Oak to have a better understanding of the model? And then we're going to start digging in more detail in the model. But this is the scenario. You just got the spreadsheet. So what I do is I go to my Oak and I run the summarize. Why? Because the summarize generates reports. So it doesn't change the model, although you should always make a copy. Generates reports with information about the model. And you can see the different reports here. There are 6 reports, which we're going to have a quick look. Just a quick advice here. If you're running this specific report, the referred constants, the process will take a bit more time than the usual seconds. Why? Because the referred constants, it's the list of all the cells with constants, so no formulas, that are being referred by a formula. So the software needs to trace back all the formulas and find the constants that are driving those formulas. So the whole idea is to get the inputs of a model, okay? But because of that process, it takes a bit more time than the other ones. So if you're in a bit of a hurry, don't use that one. Don't select that report. Just select all the other ones. And when you have a bit of time, then just run that, okay? So you select the reports, all the sheets, that's the workbook that you want, the demo workbook, and all the sheets. You press go, and what you get, so we don't need to wait for the software, you get a file like this. So Oak will generate a new workbook, so it's not on the model, with all the reports on the bottom, as you can see. So what we can get from the reports? Well, the first one, and this will be the longest explanation of today because there's a lot of information here, but I'll try to skim through it. In terms of questions, probably because it's kind of we have about 12 people. Maybe we can do a Q&A in the end, or just write your question on the chat, and then we can talk about those questions in the end, okay? If that's okay with you. Right, so summary report. This is, as you can see, a list of all the sheets and statistics. How many cells, how many formulas, how many constants, how many arrays. Arrays is what we call, the data tables. When you do a data table for sensitivities, an array. You also have here dynamic array formulas. So for those that might not be familiar with this, with Excel 365, Microsoft launched a new type of formula called dynamic array formula. And that's when you do a formula, especially using range names, for example, you do equals revenue minus costs. And the formula automatically spills across the entire range. So you don't need to do a copy paste. So, or a copy paste, the copy across. So, and the dynamic array formula, it's a formula that will dynamically go across the array of the ranges that you're using. Now, why am I making a point of this? Because there's not a lot of people doing financial models with dynamic array formulas, but you start to see some. And the problem is when you're investigating a row, let's say a formula like EBITDA, you look at the formula and only the first cell has the formula. The other ones, if you go there, there's nothing inside. You see a value, you see the formula in gray, but if you press F2, there's nothing. So those cells will be kind of empty, let's say. So you just need to know, okay, are they using these new formulas anywhere? That's the whole point of this column. Okay. Quick one here. You can see there's a very hidden sheet. Hopefully you'll be aware that there are in Excel, you can hide the sheet or very hide the sheet. The difference is when I go to the model, if I right click, I can hide or I can unhide. But you can also very hide. And if you have a very hidden sheet, it's not available here to unhide. So bottom line is you might have more sheets than the ones that you are unhiding. Okay? How do you unhide? Because you run the report, you see, oh, there's one here, calc of INP. The next step is you go to your oak, you go to worksheets, worksheet manager, and you make sure that they're all visible. And if you scroll down, there's the very hidden. So when you change this to visible, and now press OK, you're going to see the sheet coming up down here. So I'm going to do OK, apply. And there you go. There's the calc of INP that was very hidden. Now you might be asking, okay, but how do people very hide the sheet if they don't have oak? Well, you can do that on the Visual Basic editor. So if you're familiar with macros, the Visual Basic editor where you create macros, there's a place with properties that you can change the properties of the sheets. So you can very hide a sheet in there. Okay. Right, so now we have that available. Let's go back to the report. You don't need to run it again because as you can see, we managed to find all the information. You can see it's not a big model, 600 rows, it's the maximum. Columns, there are not a lot of columns, 51, but I could clearly see that's not a very well laid out model because all the sheets have different number of columns. It's a bit of all over the place, okay? The number of formulas, you can also see that the majority is here. So that's probably the calculations sheet or the workings sheet, but they have formulas, again, all over the place. So if you build a model using at least the Operis best practices, you would do all the inputs in one place, you do the calculations and you do the outputs, not formulas everywhere. Okay? But there we go. So that's our first view of the model, and things that you might have to do is to change that property here. Now, this property has to do with calculation. So probably most of you, if you're Excel proficient users, you would have the calculation mode in manual. So every time you do a change on a model, you have to press F9 to recalculate the model. But if some of you are using automatic mode, you would expect all the sheets to be calculated automatically, unless one property, which is next to the ones on that we saw here, if this is disabled, that means that that sheet, it's not automatically calculated. So you need to go there. So if you're using automatic mode, make sure that the model is all enabled, all the sheets are enabled, because otherwise that sheet disabled will not be with the latest changes, okay? You have to go there and press F9. Right, so I'm going to move to here. Distinct formulas. So this is the list of all the formulas on the model. And I'm going to sort these by largest to the smallest. So what is complexity? It's about the size of the formula. It's not about the intellectual complexity. It's about the size. And as you can see on the note here, is the number of elements which make up the formula. Okay, so it's the number of elements. Why you want to know this? Well, first, if it's a model that you just received today, you want to see what kind of formulas the model has. Okay, is there good practices here? Clearly there isn't, because you don't do formulas like these, or at least you shouldn't. If you need to do something like this, break them in 4 or 5 cells or 6 cells. You have 1 million rows, so there's no point in trying to do all these in the single cell. Okay, but it's not complex. It's an if function, and then if it's 0, then do the average. Otherwise, do these long arithmetic calculation. So the complexity is about the size. At Operis, if the guys are building models, they know that anything above 12, they will just break down in 2 formulas, okay, or 3 or 4. But we try not to go above 12. 15 is the maximum. So it's a good tool not only to understand the model that you received, but if you're building something, keep an eye on your formulas, run the summarize from time to time, and see, okay, this is getting too big. I'm going to break down the formula. Because if you look at this formula here, oops, sorry about the left and right. I just want to show you one formula here. So if you see this formula, it's an if, is, and a match, lookup inside the match. There's an index again. There's a match inside the index, which is fine. But then there's another lookup, which I think it's inside the match, and another lookup. Clear example of how not to do a calculation, a formula in Excel. And still the complexity is not the highest because, again, it's the size. Okay. Spilled frequency, if it's a dynamic array, it will tell you how many cells is spilling. So again, it's another way to find if this is a dynamic array formula or not. If there's any links to other sheets on that formula, or if you see something like this book link here, then you know that that formula has a link, one or more links to external workbooks. Okay. So if you want to know which formulas have links to external workbooks, you can, for example, sort by this column if you want. Okay. So next one is that long report that I told you. So these are all the cells with constants and their values, which are being used by formulas. So there's plenty of values here, plenty of them. These are mainly inputs. Okay. And you can see by the worksheet name, it's I, so I'm assuming it's inputs. Okay. One thing that you can do with this report is just imagine there's other ways to do this, but you could run the report on this version of the model with all these inputs. Then you receive a new version and you want to see the differences on the inputs. You can run the summarize on the new version and then compare these 2 reports. I'm going to show you the compare tool. So you really don't need to do at this level of detail, but you could compare the 2 referred constants lists. Okay? Now, risk analysis. So this is where we try to measure the formula risk, not the financial risk, the formula risk. And there's the score. So I'm going to sort that largest. So what is the score? As you can see by the formula, it's a sum product. So it's a weighted average. And weighted average of what? We believe there are certain functions and practices that will increase the risk of an error. For example, nesting. Nesting is, as you know, brackets inside brackets inside brackets. The more nesting you have, the higher will be the risk of an error on your formula. So what we try to measure here is we count how many times you have that risk factor, and then we multiply that risk factor, right? And that's what the score does. It multiplies that number of occurrences by the risk weight that we assign to that risk factor. Now, these numbers here are our default values, right? So for example, nesting, if it's 3 levels, you get 1 mark, but if it's 5 levels, you get 5 marks. 5 marks every time you have 5 levels. So you might have multiple 5 levels. Like here, there's 6 different levels, 6 times with 5 levels of nesting. Now, offsets, indirects, lookups, they're always very tricky. If someone changes the model, your range that you're looking at, your offsets or your lookups, will be looking at different ranges that can cause errors. So we believe it's not the best option. Probably index and match will be more flexible. If you're using hard-coded constants, if you're using range names, you might want to say, well, range names are bad. I want to give a mark for each range name used on the formula. Or you might say range names are good, so -1. And that will reduce your score, okay? If you're using cell references, well, so here it's either range names or cell references. You penalize or you will benefit whatever you think it's the best approach. This is the number of cells referenced by the formula. Right? So you don't multiply. This is more to know this formula has references to 17 cells. But look at this one, 369 cells are referred by this formula. Why? Probably because of the VLOOKUPs, the ranges. Right, so I'm going to go back here. And again, keep an eye on these. Keep your model simple, or check what you should expect from the model that you're reviewing. Right? If you see numbers like 15, 18, 10, then you probably have a very good model with a low risk of errors. Okay, so I'm going to move back, move here. Cross references, a simple list of how many formulas you have with links to other sheets. So what I can take from here is that looking at this sheet here, I can see that that sheet has a lot of formulas with links to other sheets. So it's a crucial or an important sheet on the model. Okay, but if I look at this, it only has 2 formulas with links to the summary and time. I wouldn't spend too much time on these. So that gives you an idea of the web of links between the model. Okay, you should expect to have 2 or 3 important sheets with a lot of links, and the other ones to be just reports. Finally, range names. So this is for those more familiar with range names. So this is a list of all the range names on the model. What you can get from here is sometimes you would have names pointing to cells in other models. So most of the times, a range name is pointing to a cell on the actual workbook. But if I scroll down here, you're going to start to see very strange formulas. Look at these. So this range name called chcache is pointing, it's an offset that it's pointing to this model, which is called blank source in someone's machine, mfox. Okay, so you can find that your model has links to other workbooks by using the use of range names. Okay, so you want to find this range name, and you want to see what, or you want to understand what formula is that. If you don't have access, that's going to be an error. Okay, and finally, there's another one about range names, which is overlapping range names. So if I have a range name for these cells, and I call these revenue, and then I have a range name which is like this, so it's a section, then it's an overlapping range name. Okay. Right, so that's the summarize, and apologies for taking so long, but I think it's crucial that you understand what information you can take from the summarize. And I would always run that on a model that I'm not familiar with. Once you do that, the second tool, let me go back to the model, is the map. Because with the map, and I'm going to close the summarize, it will give you a graphic representation of the model by painting the cells depending on the content. So if it's a formula, it's purple. If it's a constant number, it's yellow, and so on. And we'll also tell you the left to right consistency of the model. So let's have a look on the map. So you say, okay, I want to map everything. You press go, so nothing to do here. And the next thing you get is another workbook, the map workbook. And you can see there's an explanation of the colors. So these are formulas, these are dynamic arrays. So if you see those dark purple or blue, it's a dynamic array. Then you have constants, logical constants or numeric constants, errors, and so on. And then we draw a map for each sheet. Let me just show you here, this one. So this is the CSV sheet, and immediately you see it's all formulas. I don't see any constants here, which is a good sign, all calculations. But hey, okay, so there's some constants here. Then you scroll down, and the symbol tells you that the formula is left to right consistent. So it's the same as the one on the left. So as long as you see all these filled across the entire model, and they're all with that symbol, it's a good sign. All the formulas are left to right consistent. Now, you can do the check visually, scrolling down, up and down. Guys, scroll down. Oh, there's more constants here. And you scroll down. And you can see, for example, here, someone forgot to copy across the entire project. Right? Or someone has a formula here, why? Or, for example, here, someone changed the last formula. All these things you can inspect visually, one by one, or because you want to save your time, you have these insights report. And we've done the work for you. So we're going to tell you on this range, you have errors. Errors, I mean value, div 0, name errors, any type. On these ranges or cells, you have inconsistencies. So let's have a look. So if I follow the link, so I'm going to choose one here. See? So you don't need to visually inspect all the sheets. Just look at the insights, and we're going to tell you where's the inconsistency. Let me go back here. Let's have a look on that one here. So there you go. So this is the worst case of inconsistencies because you have the same formula from the beginning of the project, and then somewhere in the project, they change the formula from that point onwards. So this is now a different formula from the one before, two different formulas. So your map will show you the layout, so formulas and constants. It will show you the left to right consistency and will tell you where are the inconsistencies. Now, taking from here, now you will say, okay, but I want to see the formula on the model. So I want to go to the model and see what's happening. What's the difference? How do you go from here to the model? You're going to use another OAK tool. So if you go here, you have these numbers. So this is a tool that we call the dial pad or trace precedence, and allows you to go to the first precedent, the second precedent, the third precedent, and so on of a formula, or the last precedent, the one before the last, the second last, and so. So sometimes when you have a formula, you don't want to actually drill down the formula. You just want to go to that precedent immediately. So what do? You go to that tool and you say, go to the second precedent, or the third, or the first. Now here, you want to go to the first precedent of this cell. And you can use the mouse, or probably most of you like to use shortcuts like we do here. And you can do Alt-K because it's OAK, as you can see. And then the numbers are from 1 to 9. So Alt-K1. And suddenly, you're now on the model that you've done the map. And this is the formula that the next one is the inconsistency. Okay, so we have a difference between these two. Now, how do you see the difference? Sometimes you just look at the formula bar and it's very easy to understand. You know, I'm just moving and I can see there's a small change there. Okay. Oops, there's someone else joining. There you go. But it's not always that easy to find a difference between one cell and the other. And I'm going to just put these with a different color. so I don't lose the cell references. Now here, what tool do I have in Oak that allows me to analyze two formulas, or one or two? What you can do here is you select the first formula, and then with Control, I'm going to select the second one. So my point here is I'm not selecting a range. I'm selecting two individual cells, because now, using the Formula Explorer, we're going to open our Formula Explorer that allows you to look at two cells at the same time. Why? Because I selected two cells. So now you have formula on the left, formula on the right, and how do you use the Formula Explorer? Keys. Let me just extend these, because as you see, it's a long formula, so I'm going to just increase the size here. Okay, and you can put these to a second screen, and usually you don't need all this space, but it's just for our training. It's easier. Right, so where is the difference between the two cells, the two formulas? If I go up and down on my keyboard, you see that I'm going through the arguments of the formula, and this is the first point. You see the formula here, it's an if. So what we do here is, as you can see, it just goes through all the cells without any specific order. But if I want to read the formula as an if, I change the view to drill, okay? Which is the default, by the way. When you open the Formula Explorer, it's on drill mode. And what is the drill? The drill will show you the arguments of the if. So here's the condition. Here's what happens if it's true. What happens if it's false? So it doesn't go cell by cell, okay? It goes by arguments. And then I can just press to the right and expand that branch, go down, expand that branch. Then you see the numbers here is for your keyboard. So if I want to go to this third precedent, I press 3. I'm on the third. E goes to the previous. H goes home. 1 goes to the first one. H goes home. 3 goes to the last one. So you see H, once you get used to those, you can navigate across the precedents very quickly. Now, what you probably saw or didn't saw is that we are not moving to the cells. So if I go down here to this cell, you'd expect the Formula Explorer to move to that cell. Well, it doesn't, because on the settings, or G, I don't have these options selected, okay? Automatically select ranges, because I don't want my Excel to go left and right, jumping across. But if you want, you do save, and the next time you press X, explore, now you'll see that I'll be moving. See, now I'm on AP31, and you can see it's here. It's probably on the back, right? And let me go back here. Now, by the way, because I clicked somewhere else outside of Excel, the Formula Explorer, if you're not using it like this, it will collapse automatically. It's still there, but it's not taking space of your screen. And at any time, if you want to bring it back, I just do Alt-Tab and bring it back. So escape, work on your model. You need the Formula Explorer, Alt-Tab, and it's here. Now, just before, and it's here, but as you see, it wasn't on the cell where I was, because you don't want the Formula Explorer to keep reading all the time the cells where you are. Okay? I'll show you that in a second. So it's still on those two. And the point that I was making here is how to compare. Well, if I press S, now I'm on the right side. Now I can expand. I can look at these. And if you look at the formula, you can start to see if I collapse these, and if I go S, jump to that side, H, home, if I just collapse, I can start to see the difference. Look at the difference here between the two formulas, okay? So that one has a calcofine P+, the one on the right has a different one. So if I press S, go down here, okay? You see the difference is there's two calcofan P. On that one, there's only one, okay? But if I change the view, okay, to list mode, So it changes here the list mode, and you can start to see the difference on the 1 plus 1 plus and not here. Right? And you will trace back the formulas. I'm going to change to D, which is drill. Okay. Oops, view drill. Go. And now I'm on drill mode S, and I'm again in the beginning of the 2. Now I'm going to close this. Okay. Because I'm just looking at the watch here. What else you can do with it? So let's say escape. Now I understand the difference between the two, but now I want to investigate another formula. And if you remember that big formula that we saw on the report with the highest risk, I have it here. Okay, so there you go. So that's the very nice if is NA match index lookup. I'm going to do Alt Tab because I want to bring the Formula Explorer. But as you can see, I'm going to reduce the size here. It's still on the other cell. If you want to investigate, to explore the current cell, then you just do N, new. And now we read. So why is not reading automatically? Because you don't want to have a tool always reading your active cell. That takes time on your Excel, it takes performance. So that's why we decided now, if you want to read the current cell, just press N. So there's the nice formula of the if, but because you're on drill mode, you can see this is the condition, if what, okay? And actually we tell you the result of the if. It's false. As it is, it's false. If it's true, it will do this. If it's false, it will do this. Okay? And then you can drill down. Another thing is you see the purple labels. These are not range names. This is our Formula Explorer reading the label on the left. Okay. Now, most of the times you only have one label, so this works very well. If you have two labels, then it will read the leftmost label. Okay. So there it goes. So that's the first of period and the tenor and so on. Now, just imagine that you have this huge formula. You don't want to understand the formula. You just want to know what is the actual calculation at the moment. Okay, it's an if. I don't care if it's true or false. What is actually the formula doing? For that, you have the prune. So this tool, the prune, will take the formula, will remove, prune or cut, the items that are not being used. Why? Because if it's false, it would not do the true. Or if it's true, it will not do the false. So we'll just remove it from the formula. It will do your lookups, your matches to find the cells so that it will give you the very last calculation of the formula, if that makes sense. So if I press U, which is prune, as you can see, this is the very same formula, but once you take everything that is not active and you take and you solve all the lookups and matches and everything. So if you want to focus on the result, 29, you know that 29 comes from this cell, and that cell. That's it, okay? And then you can drill down. Calcofine P, so that comes from here, the first row period, which is an input, because there's no more branches, so that's an input. And then this comes from the calcofine P, that cell, and then comes from that one. This is the terrible thing that you're used to see in models, but you can carry on. So the tenor 29 is the contract period minus the unitary charge escalator, okay, which comes from these two inputs. So the unitary charge is nothing more than the contract length of the project, which is an input, okay, minus this term, which is another input. So you can drill down all these and have a very good understanding of the formula. And the prune, it's only on the Formula Explorer. It will not change your formula. And if I press U, back to the beginning, prune, not prune, right? Or if you want, why not pruning just that one? So that is the prune of that formula, right? And that's the prune of that one, and so on, okay? Right. Now, let me just have a look on the chat because it might make sense. Okay, so the prune button works only when there are formulas that include array calculations. Well, it depends what we call array. So it will work, for example, with an if. So an if function, not really with an array. So if this is true, do this formula. If it's false, do that one. So the prune will do the one which is active at the moment. That means that you might not always get the same result with the prune because the conditions might change. So what we call the active path might be different. But you will apply to arrays, so ranges like lookups and the VLOOKUPs and offsets, but it will also apply to this idea of active path. Okay, so it's the two things together, if that makes sense. Okay? Oops, not the slideshow. Back here, there we go. There's other things that you can do with the Formula Explorer, for example, dependence. So this will show you all the dependence of this formula, of these H154, internal and external. What we call external is dependence on other sheets or other workbooks. Okay, so this one doesn't have any dependence. It's not precedence, or it's dependence. Okay, and I'm going to close here. Right. You have the split, you have the refresh if you want, you have the collapse to collapse the entire thing, you have the prune. Another thing that you can do, which is especially useful when you're changing a formula or exploring a formula which is across a row, like the DSRA target formula, let's say. If you press F2, you can change the formula here. The difference to change it in Excel is that when you press OK or Enter, the Formula Explorer will copy across to the entire range. So it's kind of two in one. You edit the cell and copy across at the same time, because the Formula Explorer will detect that it's the same formula across the row. So we'll just copy that change that you've made across. And Escape works exactly like the other ones. Right, now let's go back to other tool here, which is the compare that I want to show you. Okay? Now, compare is fundamental when you're using financial models, because you're going to get always a new version of the model. You always want to compare the two and see the differences. So what I have here, let me just move to another sheet here to make a point in a second. So, so this is our model. Now imagine that you just received a new version of this model. And I have here one that I called Demo Compare. So it's the same model, but we've made some changes. And you want to know where are the changes, what changes were made between version 1 and version 2. I'm going to go back here to the same sheet. Right. Without knowing anything, you get, this is the old model. This is the new model. You go to Oak, you go to compare workbooks, and you say, I want to compare this new version, all the sheets, with my previous version. And the main point here is this, the alignment. So what you have to do is you have to tell Oak that you want to align, especially the rows. Why? Because as you can see, the revenue on the new model is on row 39, but on the previous one, it was on row 34. So if you're going to ask a software to compare two spreadsheets row by row, of course, it's going to be very, very different because things are not on the same place. By doing the alignment, you will telling Oak that go through these labels, and when you find a label, trying to find the same, and see if it's the same on the same location. If it's not, just insert empty rows until they match. And what that will do is that Oak will insert rows here until the revenue is on row 39. Okay, so that what that makes is that all the cells below will not be shown as different because they are not different. Okay, while if you don't do the alignment, all these cells will have different cell references, but actually it's the same formula as the new version. So the alignment allows you to just compare genuine differences. Right, so go back to the model, say, yes, I want to align the contents, the formulas, not the values, and I want the report. I want to see the differences here, and I want to see the differences in the text, which I'll show you. Now, very important is once you choose alignment by rows, you need press next, and you need to tell Oak which columns should we use to the alignment. So here you can choose until maximum of 4, and you should choose the ones with the highest number of labels, because as I told you, that's how Oak will make the alignment. So I can see that A doesn't have anything, but because it's 4, I'm going to use B, C, D, and E, especially E. So I'm going to select 4 columns, pass to the right, so alignment columns are B, C, D, and E, and now I'm going to do compare. And you see that it starts to generate the report, but then it's the alignment that has to be done. And now comparing sheet by sheet. It doesn't take that long. Okay, compare with a manual check. Now, there's your comparison report. Tells you there's 2 cells different on that sheet. There's 7 cells with differences on that one. There's a lot of them here and a lot of them here, and also here. But the other ones don't have, so don't bother. You don't need to look at those. There's no differences. If I want to see the differences on these sheets, I have a report here. You can follow the link. So that's a report, the changes between the inputs. And this is what I was saying in the beginning, that you could compare the referred constants report to referred constants, or just run a compare, because we're going to tell you on this sheet that was a constant change. Okay, CC. On the help, you have all these values and what they mean. But you see, there's a value before, there's the value after. That's it. Okay. Or if I go to this one, has a lot of changes. And here we're going to tell exactly the difference between the 2 versions. So it's not the entire formula, it's just that cell reference. So this option in red is the option that I showed you here. Highlight differences in text. That's why you see that in red on the report. Now, I'm on the version 2. Not only you get the report, which I'm going to close the report. We don't need a report anymore. Don't save, but you have the highlight differences. There you go. So all these cells in this shade of blue are different from the other ones. But you see here, there's no differences on these formulas because the alignment pushed them down and they have now the same formula as the previous version. So there's no changes here, but there were new rows here. There's different words here, different label. The formula is the same. They just changed the label. These are different formulas. And when you see yellow, it means it's a row inserted by Oak for the alignment. Now here, there's not a lot, but if you look at version 1, a lot of rows. Why? Because they weren't here before, and the new version has them. Okay. Now, once you run the report, you see the differences and so on. So if I go to the inputs, let me go here. You see in blue, you see the differences on the inputs. This is version 1. This is version 2 inputs. There you go. So all these cells are different. Okay. A good thing about our compare here is that if you want, you can send the model to someone with these changes, with these colors, and once the other person checks the differences, you can go to compare and modify. So it doesn't have to be on the same session. You can save and after that and modify still. Okay, that's okay. There you go. You go to oops. But where am I? Here. Compare and modify. So that was version 2. This is version 1. Remove all the changes from the compare. Okay. Now, and time flies, but I want to show just a couple of tools more. The other ones are kind of self-explanatory, I would say, but that's why it's important to have these ones. And also, by the way, because we're going to have a second session, if there's any tool here that you would like to explore a bit more, or after you started using it, there's something that you like to check, I would probably suggest you, and I'm sorry, Frederick, to call you up here, but I would suggest you to send your questions or your suggestions to the second training session, and then I can cover those on the second one. Okay, so feel free to send those across so we can include them on the second session.
Yeah, absolutely. I can collect those and then reach out to you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Frederick. Right, now, let me show you the search. Search. Well, there's some search which are very self-explanatory. So search for formulas with hard-coded constants, very useful. For example, show me all the formulas with hard-coded values, but I don't want zeros and ones because people would do 0 minus or times 1. So here I'm going to type 0, 1 as exceptions. And when I do search, right, Oak will select all the cells with hard-coded constants. Now remember, it's a selection, so you might not see anything here, okay? But they will be selected somewhere. Now the problem is when you're using colors, you see there's a selection, you might not find the cells very easily, the selection. What you can do is use, well, of course you could go home and then paint the cells, that works. If you want to use your own colors, we have this colors tool. Why we have colors tool? Because the guys in the office here, they use colors for the auditing process, the review process, painting the cells in certain conditions, so they can check later. So they wanted to have quick shortcuts to apply certain colors. So you can do that on the shortcuts here, define the colors and the shortcuts. I can tell you, for example, that I have here, I think it's I for pink, or I have Y for yellow, I have G, so Control-Shift-G will do these, or pink, okay? There you go. So remember, hard-coded constants, search, you get the selection. Now I can just click outside and I can see why is that picked up by the search, look at the formula. There's a 1, but that's an exception, so it shouldn't be because of that. Oh, there you go. That's a 2 there. So that's hard-coded. And if I scroll down, I might find some more. You can see some labels there. There's some formulas for the cash recovered. Oh, there's a nice one. Everyone likes to see a 365. Okay, so it's that kind of things that you can easily pick up on the model. The one that I really like to show you is the primary error cells. So just imagine that someone broke the model. Right? I'm going to break it. There you go. So this is where we all panic because everything gets value now. Instead of starting to search where is the cause, just click here, primary error cells, do a search, and we're going to point you to the cells that are causing the cascade effect. So don't bother in tracing from the bottom or anything. Run a search primary error cells and start from those, okay? Right, so I'm going to fix this, going to put a number here. I don't know if it was a link. Well, we can always do undo. There you go. References to blank cells, constant formula cells, cells that are not referred by any formulas, cells with arrays. Arrays are data tables, for example, okay, or search dynamic arrays. Now, you can see here this, but you will not see these on your Oak. This is one that we are developing. This is a pre-release version. We're testing it, but hopefully, in a couple of months, I would say, you're going to have these search circularities. And this, it's going to pick up all the circularities on your model, active or not active. Okay? You're going to have a possibility to choose, but it will give you a report of all the circularities in the model. Now, I'm going to take a risk here of just showing you, and I'm not sure if I have any circularities here. I don't think so, but we can see that. But hopefully it will make a big difference to you having a tool like this to search for circularities, okay? Of course, oh, there you go. We do have some circularities. And what you can see here is it will show you the number. The number is the first circularity, second circularity, and so on. And the first cell is the beginning of the circle reference, and then it just traces back, okay? What we're doing now is just simplifying this report, because if you start tracing, sometimes it's huge. It just takes takeover of the model across. So we're going to change these to make it more simple, but we will find all the circularities on the model for you, okay? So it's something that will be available in a couple of months. Okay, so search, and I'm thinking I'm running out of time. Now, quick one on the review. So the review allows you to pick up a cell, create an issue on this cell. So you say problem, well, not problem, but you'll say check the value or wrong debt service cover ratio, check the CFADS formula, something. And you create a new issue by default, or you can change the status if it's an existing one. You can choose the severity, and this is all customized on the settings. Okay, you can create your severity, and you press add, and you have this small symbol which depends on the severity. Now, if I go here and I create another one, okay, another testing. Okay, and these will be add, and you see it's a different icon. Now, you can use the search and find any review issues on this sheet. So we're going to select the issues that someone raised for you, okay? So you can investigate, or you can go here and manage, because that will give you the list of all the issues that you or someone else raised because you have the initials. Okay, and then you can click and actually you can navigate across the checks if it's on the settings, by the way. Okay, so you want to go, you want to close if it's hidden. If the issue is closed, you don't want to see them, for example. Okay, if I go here and if I press here, you can see the ID. It's not the cell reference. The reference is here, and you can click here and even change it, although I don't think you should. Okay, and what you can also do is export, and the export creates a sheet here. You see it kind of collapsed like the Formula Explorer, and you have a list of all the issues raised by someone. Okay, so this is a good way to raise some issues, because you could do comments. The problem with the comments is that you don't have a list of comments, you cannot change the status, you don't have a status. So that's why we come up with the issues. That's what the guys will do. Okay. And then here you have a link to the issue. We'll take you there. And if I want, I bring back the cell here. Okay. And if I go to status, I can change these to resolved, press OK, and that is now resolved. Okay. And then I can do here, and if I click on that one, for example, I can change the comment here, or if I want, I can close. Okay, and you can also, if you don't want these icons, you can also delete the icons. You can even choose not to use the icons, and you see that one is now hidden because it's resolved. So that's the review, and I think it's about time. You have more tools here. You have the prune that we saw on the Formula Explorer. Now, just advice here. These prune, if I click here, okay, it will give you the preview what will be, but once you press prune, there's no undo. Okay, so just be careful with that. Okay, or make a copy if you want. Okay. If you want to look at the precedents, but on the different workbook, try the reconstruct. The reconstruct will open a new workbook and will give you all the precedents. You have these ones that we already saw. Well, and the other ones are very simple.